morning, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, July 20th, 2020 meeting of the Birmingham Business Alliance Governmental Affairs Committee. We're excited to continue to reach out to everyone. We absolutely look forward to the day where we can gather in person again and have Darryl Perkins slave over a hot grill and bring us a great lunch. But from now on, for this current time, we're excited to be able to engage with you and keep important conversations happening like the one happening today. Elizabeth, I can turn it over to you real quick.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Calvin. Just wanted to thank our sponsor, Verizon. We have Justin Tanner here with us today. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. Justin is a director with Verizon's state and local government affairs team based in Atlanta. He's responsible for developing and implementing legislative strategy, tactics, and content in support of Verizon's policy interests. He's a former White House appointee in the Obama administration, very impressive. And he's also a former mayoral appointee in the Reid administration with the city of Atlanta. Justin graduated from Howard University and went to law school at Vanderbilt. Justin's been serving as a member of the BBA's Governmental Affairs Committee for the past year and a half, I believe, and we've greatly enjoyed working with him. So Justin, thank you so much for being with us. We're very grateful to have Verizon serving as the sponsor of today's meeting. And with that, you can take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for that warm introduction. You all, as she mentioned, I'm Justin Tanner, Director of State and Local Government Affairs for Verizon South Region. That's a territory that actually encompasses Georgia, South Carolina, and of course, Alabama. This September will actually mark my third year as a member of the Verizon family. And again, as Elizabeth mentioned, while the city of Atlanta is actually where I'm based, over these last few years, Birmingham has literally become my second home. In fact, before we had this little thing called COVID-19, I actually found myself traveling back and forth to Birmingham quite frequently. And so often, in fact, that my wife had literally begun to start to complain that I was away too much. So hopefully she isn't listening. I think she left to get some groceries. But it was through that routine, that 2.5 hour back and forth commute that I had a time to reflect, and I've grown to appreciate the historic connection between our two cities, as well as the great states of Georgia and Alabama. A connection that, as recently as this past weekend, has crept back into national consciousness with the passing of, my congressman, the late great giant of a man, John Lewis of Georgia's 5th Congressional District. And so with that as my segue, I would like to both welcome you to today's edition of BBA's expanded monthly Governmental Affairs Committee meeting, where in just a few moments we'll hear from the Honorable Terri Sewell of Alabama's 7th Congressional District. But before I introduce the Congresswoman, I would like to say a brief word about Verizon's relationship with the Birmingham Business Alliance and specifically the city of Birmingham. We're very proud to sponsor BBA, and we recently increased our level of commitment because we recognize how important this organization is to the Birmingham community. This city, along with Mayor Randall Woodman, your mayor, has a high level of importance for my company, especially over the last few years. We've been building a relationship with your mayor, my good friend Calvin, Jim Stanley, Ken King, and so many others at the city. And it's through this partnership that we were working with our partner industry peers earlier this year to finally get a small cell ordinance passed. And this will allow companies like Verizon and our competitors the ability to densify our much needed, our existing 4G LTE networks, as well as pave the way for the next generation of wireless technology. So many of you all have heard of that, our 5G technology. Because in many ways, laying the foundation of this technology is revolutionary, we feel that we have a duty and responsibility, along with other tech companies, to partner with stakeholders in the public and private sector to make sure that all communities are able to thrive as the world around them changes. And this is why partnerships with the Birmingham Business Alliance and Congresswoman Sewell are of so much importance. Of course, certainly no stranger to this group. Congresswoman Terri Sewell is in her 5th term representing Alabama's 7th congressional district. She is one of the first Black woman elected to Congress from Alabama in her own right, and is the first Black woman to ever serve in the Alabama congressional delegation. Her list of accolades and awards go on and on and on. She currently sits on the exclusive House Ways and Means Committee and brings to the committee more than 15 years of experience as a securities and finance attorney. She sits on a number of subcommittees, including the subcommittees of health, trade, and the worker and family support. And as I perused her bio, I thought there were a couple of quick points that were of particular relevance to this group. First, throughout her time at Congress, Congresswoman Sewell has been an outspoken advocate for job creation, workforce development, skills training, and providing resources and economic opportunities to her constituents in the 7th Congressional District. Second, as a member of Congress representing Alabama's Civil Rights District, Congresswoman Sewell has had a passion and has been a champion for recognizing and honoring the sacrifices of freedom fighters who served as most powerful agents of change. Third, prior to her election in 2010, Congresswoman Sewell was the first Black woman partner in the Birmingham Law Office of Maynard, Cooper, and Gale PC, where she distinguished herself as one of the only Black public finance lawyers in the state of Alabama. A proud member of Alabama's Rule Belt, Black Belt, Congresswoman Sewell was the first Black valedictorian of Selma High School. She is an honors graduate of Princeton University and Oxford University and received her law degree from Harvard Law School. Last, and certainly not least, Congresswoman Sewell is a Silver Star and life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I would be remiss if I didn't throw that in there because my mother and my sister are both members of that same illustrious, historically Black sorority. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, I will turn it over to Congresswoman Sewell, and thanks again for being here.
Well, first, I want to thank you, Justin, for that wonderful introduction, delivered exactly as my mother wrote it. So thank you for doing that. And also to Verizon for sponsoring today's meeting. I also want to welcome Mr. Kenneth Coleman, the new Executive Director or CEO of the Birmingham Business Alliance. I understand today is his first day. Welcome aboard. We look forward to rolling up our sleeves and working side by side with you and the Business Alliance on federal issues that matter most to the city of Birmingham, to its residents and businesses. So thank you so much for this opportunity today. So I'm actually in my Washington office. Today is a day that we're back in session. In fact, we're in the middle of voting. So when you hear the bells go off, that probably means that my group's turn it is to vote. You know, we live in very turbulent times in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. I'm very mindful every day. I began every day, I'm sure like so many business leaders in Alabama, by looking at our dashboard, the Alabama Public Health Dashboard, to see how we're faring when it comes to COVID-19. Looks like we have had 17 new deaths since Friday, and that brings the total number of deaths in the state of Alabama to 1,200. The total number of cases exceeds 60,000 confirmed cases to be exact, and this is an increase of 1,933 over yesterday's report. We do indeed live in sombering times, and I can think of no better thing that we're going to do, take up hopefully in the next 2 weeks, than another stimulus package to address the ongoing challenges of COVID-19. I thought what I'd do is talk a little bit about the times in which we live in, and really want to give another tip of the hat to the wonderful giant that is John Lewis, that we mourn his passing. But know that John Lewis planted lots of seeds in lots of people. I could hear his voice now saying that in the midst of injustice, we have to say something, do something, and remember to keep the faith. My heart is heavy. My heart is heavy. We also are in the midst of an economic crisis brought on by this global pandemic, where we see soaring unemployment and we see long lines in the unemployment offices in Alabama. And we're all struggling to just keep up with the demand for more resources, testing, tracing, contact tracing. We see a run on our hospitals. And I was very pleased that the governor took the bold but necessary action of instituting a statewide order for masks. When I think about leadership, I think of the leadership of our mayor, Mayor Randall Woodfin, the leadership of Mayor Stephen Reed, and local leadership across the state of Alabama that have been for months leading us through this pandemic, and I am grateful for their leadership. We're going to still need more money and more stimulus, and I am pleased that the House of Representatives led that effort 5 weeks ago by passing the HEROES Act, which would provide not only additional unemployment resources, extend the federal pandemic unemployment resource of $600 a week until December 31st, but it will also provide hazard pay to frontline essential workers. The tragedy of the pandemic that we're living in is that it has disproportionately affected African Americans, shining a very bright spotlight to systemic disinvestments when it comes to healthcare, a renewed challenge to the state of Alabama to expand Medicaid. Any help and all help that businesses in Alabama, especially in Birmingham, and those as a part of the Birmingham Business Alliance can offer, the many voices in our medical community urging our state to expand Medicaid, especially during a pandemic, is most welcome. Likewise, we've seen civil unrest in our streets like never before. People mourning the death, the tragic loss of life, and the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, just to name a few. Countless African Americans that have died at the hands of the police. Once again, the facts are startling. The facts are that African Americans make up just 13% of the population in the United States, but are 3 times more likely than whites to die at the hands of the police, and 1.5 times more likely to die when they're unarmed at the hands of the police. It reminds us all of the clarion call that John Lewis says, in the face of injustice, do something, say something. We must all do our part. We cannot tackle this without dealing with the systemic disinvestments in healthcare and economic opportunities in the African American community. And I know that our city is leaning in and governing forward. We need the business community help in doing that as well. When I think about my perch as the vice chair of Ways and Means, a committee that includes not only tax, Social Security, Medicare, and trade, and so much more, I can think of no better way that we can lean forward on this issue than to tackle the health disparities and discrimination that lead our nation in healthcare. I believe that we are at a turning point in this country, and I know that BBA has committed to being a leader in Birmingham in the effort to create positive change, which gives me hope at this moment. With broad input from companies and outside groups, we really can make a difference and make a change. At BBA, you have the opportunity to be instrumental in creating job opportunities and fostering economic development in our communities that make up Alabama's 7th Congressional District. Your commitment to inclusion is what is necessary, but in this moment, we cannot do the bare minimum. The bare minimum is no longer going to cut it. We have to be forward-leaning, and we have to be willing to take our positions wherever our positions are, whether it's in the halls of Congress or in the halls of your corporation, and really lean in on this issue. It's not enough to say that we're promoting diversity. People want to see real actions. And when I'm asked by business leaders across this country what they can do, I tell them, you should think strategically and act locally. Yes, it's very true that the NAACP and Urban League and EJI, national organizations that need our resources. But when you take on adopting a school system, say the Birmingham school system, and you provide them with the resources that they need to open their schools back up, be it Chrome notebooks or facial masks or the like, you can really make a difference. So I want to just urge all of you to think strategically, but act locally where your footprint is. You can and should make a difference where you are. So when people ask me, what can my company do? My answer has always been to think locally and act strategically. The thousands of young kids in Alabama's Black Belt who don't have access to the internet at homes need your help. Verizon, AT&T, all of your help. There cannot be a connectivity to classrooms during this pandemic if we're not leaning forward and using our resources to help make a difference where we work, where we live. Think about the small communities where you have your footprint and think about what you can do. When I think about what we're doing here in Congress, I'm honored to lead the seminal piece of legislation that would give $100 million for broadband as a part of an economic recovery effort from COVID-19. I know that the state of Alabama has received many resources as a part of the CARES Act and would receive even more resources if the Senate takes up the HEROES Act. I fully anticipate that the HEROES Act, while not in all of its forms, will be addressed by the Senate. We're waiting, anxiously waiting on the Senate side to address some of the key issues. First and foremost, testing, the continuation of making sure that every community has access to testing and quick and speedy answers to those tests. We know that the labs are overrun, but waiting 4 and 5 days to hear about whether or not you have COVID-19 doesn't help us in the contact tracing and doesn't help us in slowing the spread. We need more resources in that, and we will continue to get more resources when it comes to that. Likewise, Congress passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act 3 weeks ago now, and a similar bill was introduced and passed on the Senate side. I have hope that the leaders on both the Senate and the House will sit down and try to reconcile those two bills. Clearly, the issue that is the sticking point is qualified immunity. But when you talk to the grieving families, too many grieving families that have lost their loved one's life senselessly at the hands of our police, the one thing that they say over and over again is that the inability to receive civil damages is something that is really heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. So qualified immunity is a sticking point. You know, I'm always a girl who sees the world through a lens of the glass being half full. So I hope that hope springs eternal and that we can get to some sort of resolution when it comes to the Justice and Policing Act. I think paramount in that is a ban on chokeholds and a ban on no-knock warrants that killed Breonna Taylor. Also dealing with the issue of qualified immunity. You know, one of the things that was a part of this bill that I thought was really important, especially to our young people, is a series of grants for communities to reimagine community policing. That to me gets at the heart of the matter that so many of the young people are talking about when they talk about trying to make sure that we have adequate resources to fight homelessness, adequate resources to fight domestic violence and the like, that we're not calling on public safety officers to really intervene in issues that deal with very specific human issues like mental illness, homelessness, domestic violence. We can and should reimagine how our communities deal with public safety. And I know that the city of Birmingham is doing just that. As I said, we're back in Congress now. We're taking up this week 3 bills. First and foremost, we are taking up a bill to deal with the National Defense Authorization Act. All the appropriation bills are right now under consideration, and committees are working through the night to try to resolve any ongoing issues that relate to the Appropriations Committee. The National Defense Authorization has a very bold and I think necessary statement with respect to Confederate namings of bases throughout the country. And I think that that is a forward-leaning and bold and comprehensive challenge that has been agreed to and will stay in that bill. Whether it stays in the bill and the bill then passes the Senate and signed by the president is another matter. but I think it's a very bold and comprehensive statement that I think fits the mood of this country. We are also considering a slate of appropriation bills that deal with wastewater development, as well as we're going to consider a bill to create a commission on the status of Black men and boys. My office has several appropriation priorities that have been secured around historic preservation, helping the city of Birmingham with its renovations of the A.G. Gatson Motel and others, rural wastewater infrastructure, HBCU funding, minority health programs, increasing the number of medical residencies that are in rural and underserved urban areas. We have a whole list of appropriation priorities, all of which are included in the appropriation bills that will reach the floor over the next 2 weeks. Likewise, Congress has, as I said, will take up another COVID relief package, a HEROES Act, and I'm a strong supporter of all the tenets that are in that bill. Everything from resources like more money to our cities and our counties and municipalities throughout. Tens of millions of dollars is still needed. We need to also deal with the fact that so far the CARES money cannot be used to close the glaring loss of revenue that so many of our cities like Birmingham have experienced. And so that must be dealt with. That was dealt with in the HEROES Act, and money could be used for that. And so we will make sure that any round of funding and economic stimulus includes another round to our cities as well as our counties. I am very supportive of another round of stimulus payments for individuals and families that are at risk. The next round of payments must include child and adult dependents, many of whom have unique circumstances and expansive needs that were not addressed in the original CARES Act. We know that if we take these steps, and these steps are taken, businesses will not only be able to survive, but also be able to thrive during this pandemic. Most importantly, we must authorize more direct aid to states and localities that are on the verge of collapse. Our local governments are doing their part and need lots and lots of help. I'm going to begin end my talk with the way I began, with really invoking John Lewis's legacy. When I think about John Lewis, I think about a man who grew up the grandson of slaves in Troy, Alabama. He started his preaching career preaching to the chickens. So many of us heard him tell that story and how touching it was. John's legacy, though, is a legacy of people-to-people connection. He literally embodied love. You couldn't be in his presence without feeling his humility. Here's a man who was bludgeoned on a bridge for the simple right to vote. And yet in stride, he always believed in the indomitable spirit of human nature. He was a man who exuded love. And so as we think and go forward this week and next week, and we hope to funeralize and give John the homegoing he deserves even in the midst of this pandemic, let us all strive to put forth our better selves and really strive to do our part in both helping our nation get through this pandemic, but also really trying to fight for the main values that John embodied, which was human rights and civil rights and voting rights. No district was more important to him than Alabama's 7th Congressional District, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Selma. We all have a role to play, and I'd like to encourage all of us to use our platform, be it professionally and personally, to seek both justice in what we do, but also strive to be inclusive in all that we do. Let us do that in memory of John Lewis. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today and open it up for questions.
Well, Congresswoman, you answered almost every question that we received prior to the meeting. So thank you for that. We also, in the intro, the one thing I did want to say is that you kind of come from the first family of Selma. And you always talk about what your parents always talked about, which is education. Can you talk to us a little bit about how schools move forward, or your thoughts on how schools move forward in this time of COVID-19?
Sure. I think that for the students and for the teachers, our paramount concern has to be safety and their health, right? And so I think any plan of reopening our schools has to ensure that we do so both in a very safe and responsible manner, that we make sure that we have the proper social distancing, physical distancing in the classroom, that we figure out ways that we can make sure that the surroundings of the classroom are both not only hygienic, but that we have done all we can to ensure that those that are coming to class don't have COVID-19. We know that our young folks can be asymptomatic, people can be asymptomatic. And so figuring out ways that we can either check temperatures at the door, this has to be a well thought out plan. And I know that the state of Alabama is leaving a lot of that up to local school boards to determine that. And I just would, again, caution doing so without making sure that we have all of the proper equipment to protect against COVID-19 and the spread. What we don't need is in the middle of this pandemic to have another surge during the winter when we don't have a vaccine. So we have to be ever vigilant in taking up the advice of our healthcare professionals. And I really want to applaud the city of Birmingham and Mark Wilson, Dr. Wilson, who is Jefferson County's public health authority, for really being, taking that proper precaution and really urging us to do our part and constantly being vigilant about the personal hygiene and the testing and tracing. I'm really concerned that we haven't really begun contact tracing in a more fulsome way that we should in the state of Alabama. And I think about the $1.7 billion that the state of Alabama received and the $115 million that Jefferson County received from the federal government, and pray that it is being used to close those gaps in testing and to start that tracing, and also to provide those much needed PPE, personal protective equipment, that we'll need in order to start schools.
Congresswoman, while you have Birmingham and Huntsville, Birmingham and Montgomery and Selma in your district, you also have a lot of small towns. Can you talk a little bit about those special needs that they may be facing during this time, whether it's, you mentioned broadband, but the other kind of needs, including local, the funding for local government that has not yet kind of been passed by Congress? Well, by you all it was, but in HEROES, but not by the Senate yet.
So first and foremost, the state of Alabama does have the $1.7 billion. So it's almost $2 billion that the state of Alabama has to fight COVID-19. And they've set up a apparatus by which cities and counties can apply for reimbursement. And what I've encouraged Joe Bonner and the governor to do is not to be reactive, but to be proactive, to figure out a formula that would allow cities, especially small cities, to get money up front to help them in their efforts to fight COVID-19. I know that the city of Birmingham has a proposal before Jefferson County, and they should, because Jefferson County Commission received $115 million of CARES money. That money can't be used for lost revenue, but it can be used in every way to fight COVID-19. That's seeing the gaps of coverage in testing, making sure that we meet people where they are in the communities in which they live. So many of these small rural communities, folks don't have adequate transportation. So having only testing at the local public health department is not going to cut it. Figuring out ways that we can meet people where they are and provide that testing and the contact tracing in their communities is critically important. Clearly, broadband is important, but also closing the health gaps that exist. We're seeing rates of African Americans in the state of Alabama. We make up 26% of the population. We're 40% of the number of COVID cases and around 42% of the deaths. It's scary. And we have got to do something, not pay lip service, but actually use these resources. Enough of holding on to it. People need these resources now. And I can't stress how important it is that we cut the red tape and get the delivery of those services directly to people where they live and work.
Well, to another part of your job, we got a question here. You being on the House Intelligence Select Committee, can you talk a little bit about, in a broad sense, they said, what keeps you up at night?
Well, what keeps me up is the fact that we know in the 2016 election, there were efforts by foreign governments to interfere in our election. And we've got to make sure that we're doing everything that doesn't happen again. That includes the sowing of seeds on the internet by people manipulating Twitter and Facebook and the like. Our committee had a public hearing, its first virtual public hearing on C-SPAN, and it was with the head of the IT departments of Facebook, of Twitter, of Instagram, to talk to them, to talk to us as federal officials about how they're safeguarding the use of their platforms being hijacked by others to sow seeds of discord. And frankly, we have to do more than just have them put in their own guardrails. The federal government has to agree upon guardrails and implement those guardrails against, across the board against, for companies that have access and unfettered access to the internet, so that we can ensure that we are not propping up foreign governments' efforts to sow seeds of discord to the United States. So that's first and foremost. You know, on the Intel Committee, I'm also very, very aware that our national security gives us a big platform to promote diversity and inclusion. And I have tried to use my voice as Alabama's, as the first African-American woman appointed to the House Intel Committee by Nancy Pelosi 6 years ago. You know, when you think about the huge budgets that the National Security Committee controls, most of them are done in confidential briefings, right? John would want me to speak up and speak out when I see the fact that we have so few representation of women in our national security corridors and African Americans and other people of color in our national security. And so one of the things I'm most proud of is that we've secured millions of dollars in federal funding to promote better diversity. And that includes in centers for academic excellence. And I'm proud to say that Miles College is one of those centers of academic excellence in the Intel space and in a recipient of some of those funds.
Well, what are the, one of the things that, you know, that agriculture is still huge here in Alabama. Are there other things that can be done to continue to encourage trade with foreign entities and support for farmers here in Alabama? Absolutely.
You know, I was part of the smaller task force that got the United States, Mexico, and Canada agreement across the finish line. So the new USMCA that went into effect in July. In fact, I'm talking to Greg Canfield from the state of Alabama later today about how Alabama can receive some of those resources and benefit from open trade, you know, this openness and in the new USMCA agreement with Mexico and Canada. You know, for me, I think that the challenge, not only as a representative from Alabama 7th Congressional District, but as a daughter of the Black Belt, is to try to close some of those systemic gaps and disinvestments in the Black Belt. Everything from water and sewer, we were able to get over $300 million in more resources to USDA to fill that gap in rural wastewater treatments. So many folks in Lowndes County, I mean, we recently lost a huge champion in Lowndes County in Pamela Rush, who died of COVID-19 at the age of 48. But in so many ways, we in government failed her. She grew up very poor in Lowndes County in a school system that didn't have equal funding. She purchased her trailer home using predatory lending money. So she paid way too much for her trailer. She couldn't afford a septic tank and grew weary and was able to get direct pipe outside her house. So, you know, yes, when she flushed the toilet, it went outside, but it would either pool in her backyard or go into the stream outside her home. That's horrible environmental injustice. And that still goes on our collective watch, So I'm proud of the fact that we've been able to get more resources for wastewater treatment and water treatment. But until we get that delivered in a way to the people of Lowndes County, Perry County, all across America, rural America, has inadequate dollars and money spent on wastewater treatment and on rural water. On our collective watch, no one in America should have sewage in their backyard, no one. And so we have a clarion call for help on that as well.
Congresswoman, what is your take on the success of PPP and EIDL so far?
Well, I mean, the success has been limited when you think about how it's helped minority communities, because the money didn't get out quick enough to African-American business owners. In fact, there's, Jim Clyburn is leading up the effort to see how COVID-19 money was spent. And one of the big things, and one of the letters that I have written to the committee for them to really research and document, is just how that money, both PPP and EIDL, the SBA loans, were disseminated, have been disseminated. What percentage of that went to women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses? And the reality is that so many of our beauty shops and barber shops didn't already have pre-existing relationships with banks, and were at a disadvantage of being able to apply for the PPP program. That second tranche, once we expanded the number of lending facilities to also include the community deposit financial institutions, CDFIs and others, then we started seeing more of that money going into our community. The same is true with the SBA EIDL loans, disaster assistance loans. We're only just now seeing them come into our community. So, our work is never done. My work is never done. And I say collectively, our work is never done when it comes to ensuring that these resources get to the people who need it most and to the places that need it most.
Okay, so our questions keep coming in. What do you think about the chances are for the normal appropriations measures to pass, as well as, again, an additional round of coronavirus support, particularly, again, my boss would kill me if I didn't say direct revenue to cities for lost revenue?
So it's not for lack of leadership on the House Democratic side. We passed the HEROES Act 5 weeks ago and put it on Mitch McConnell's desk. In the HEROES Act, billions of dollars would go to directly to local cities and local counties, not depending upon the state doling it out, but direct assistance to localities is in the HEROES Act, billions of dollars. Likewise, more money for testing and treatment. The big thing that the Senate bill, and we're all anxiously awaiting what that will be, what that will have in it. I hope it will have more direct money going to localities, municipalities and counties. I'm not sure, but the roadmap is there. The roadmap is called the HEROES Act, and they just need to pick it up and pass it as far as I'm concerned. The biggest sticking point for some in the Senate side is that they want to see full liability given to businesses who have opened up their industries during the COVID-19. They like for liability insurance to be on the table. And where I sit, I think that it's critically important that we ensure the safety of the customers, the employees. That has to be paramount. And before any discussions of liability can be taken up, we have to ensure that we have the resources to do the testing, that we have the resources for the PPE, and that we are protecting the lives of people first and foremost.
As you have become kind of a national voice for the Democratic Party and women in leadership in the Democratic Party, you still found a way to be able to work with Republicans across the aisle. How have you been able to manage that at a time when things are pretty partisan and pretty divided in our country?
I think it's about relationships. One of the very first things that I remember talking to John about when I told him when I first came on board as a freshman, and I told him I wanted to be on Ways and Means like him, he said, "Now, it took me 10 years to get on Ways and Means." I said, Yes, sir. I understand. I'm a respecter of seniority. I understand that. But how can I do it? And here's why I need to be on there for my district, right? You know, the thing that I learned most about this job is all about relationships. It's all about seeing people and getting to know them as they're, who they were, who they are, not who they represent. So not seeing the R and the D, but having an opportunity to just get to know folks as people. And one of the things that you've heard me often talk about is that Alabama's delegation has a monthly lunch sponsored on the Senate side by our senior leadership on the Senate side. And that has been a great way for us to get to know each other. I am going to be very sad to see my friend Martha Roby, who I came into Congress with, and Alabama had not elected any women in their own right to Congress ever. And in one night, in June of 2010, in November of 2010, they elected two, one Black, one white, one Republican, one Democrat, and neither one of us shy. And we began a lifelong friendship that really was sparked by our both being in Leadership Alabama together before we ran for Congress. And we have to figure out ways of putting aside our partisanship politics and really try to do what's in the best interest of Alabama. And when I think about the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument, that was something that was achieved under Obama's administration, but could not have been done without the full support of the delegation. I had their full support in getting that done. Likewise, under the Trump administration, Martha and I have worked for the River Region and for the National Guard units that we support in Alabama to get the next generation weaponry. The fact that Alabama's National Guard received that was something that began under the Obama administration, but was realized under the Trump administration, but only could have happened if the full weight of the delegation, irrespective of party, was behind getting that done, and we pursued it jointly. So look, the same is true with Gary Palmer and I with Birmingham and Jefferson County. We're privileged to work together on economic items that matter most to Jefferson County and to the city of Birmingham, and I'm grateful for that friendship. Shelby and Jones are there to help us with that as well. I think that it's all about putting the needs of our people first over party. And as long as we remember that and remember that that is our job, we represent people, not just political parties.
As we begin to wrap up and really express our real appreciation for your time today and your thoughts, nobody more than you that I've ever met, the power of education shines through in your personal story, one in all that you've accomplished, but also both your parents being lifelong educators in your hometown of Selma. Can you talk a little bit about, and I've heard you talk about the importance of early childhood education and childcare. Can you talk a little bit about that, just that as a subject, a topic?
Sure. I think that we've all heard that education is a great equalizer, and it is. It is the way we can level the playing field. How else could you explain a little Black girl growing up in Selma, Alabama, getting an opportunity to compete with the best and the brightest, not just in America, going to Princeton and Harvard, but in the world, going to Oxford, and having the opportunity to rub shoulders with future presidents like President Obama, or future first ladies like Michelle Robinson, who was my big sister in college at Princeton. I my life is a living testament to the power of education as a great equalizer of man's conditions. But also with that equalization comes an important responsibility. I call this my season of service. All of us should have a season of service, whether it's an elective office, appointed office, or no office at all. We all have a role to play in giving back to future generations. That's being civically engaged and aware of our communities. And I know that BBA takes that to heart, because this organization is so critically important when it comes to the business community in Jefferson County and in Birmingham, and the role that you all play in undergirding and lifting up our communities is critically important. I want to thank you for that, but also issue you a challenge that you continue to, in doing so, think about the importance of expanding the seats at the table. It's one thing to talk it, it's another thing to walk it. And we need more diversity of voices at the table, at the decision-making table, in all of your organizations and in all of your businesses. That's critically important. Diversity is the strength of America. And the more voices that we have, the diversity of voices, the better is our exceptionalism. And that's critically important as well. I'm humbled every day and proud that I grew up in Little Selma and that I am a proud product of public schools in Selma. If I can do it, then I know that future generations can do it as well, especially given the fact that we have many, 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 many more paths and many more opportunities for our young folks today than we did when I was young. And so, you know, I think that my challenge and the challenge of all of us is that we not only walk through those doors, but we kick down those doors of opportunity so that others can walk through them as well. It's not enough that we are the first this and the first that. What's the point if the doors are slammed behind us? We have to constantly seek to create better opportunities for others. After all, as John Lewis would remind us, that is our legacy. If we lift as we climb, we are not only ensuring better decision-making today, but we're also creating bigger tables and more seats at those tables in future generations.
So everybody, we'll give a big virtual round of applause to the Congresswoman from the 7th District here in Alabama, Terri Sewell. Thank you, Congresswoman. Great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you face to face soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Elizabeth, I'll turn it back over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kelvin. I have a few words of thanks I'd like to share with everyone. Congresswoman Sewell, thank you. And thank you so much to your staff for your leadership on behalf of the Birmingham Business Alliance. We greatly appreciate you joining us today, and we greatly value our partnership and look forward to continuing our work together. I'd also like to thank all of our participants and investors for joining us today. A big thanks to Kelvin Datcher and the City of Birmingham. Kelvin's our chair of GAC this year, and he's stuck with us through this pandemic and all the changes and virtual meetings. So always grateful for your volunteerism and leadership. And last but not least, Justin Tanner and Verizon, thank you so much for sponsoring today's meeting. We greatly value your partnership. And last but not least, I would like to pass things over to our new CEO and President, Kenneth Coleman. We are so excited to have him on board. And I just wanted to give him the opportunity to say hello and share his welcome with all of you. Kenny.
Well, thank you for that, Elizabeth. And first of all, Kelvin, thank you and the city for our continued partnership and all that you do to make the lives of our residents better. I had a chance to talk with Mayor Woodfin today to remind him that the Birmingham Business Alliance is here to be his continued partner in helping our city grow and develop. Justin, let me also thank you and Verizon for your continued investment in our Birmingham Business Alliance. We appreciate you and the partnership, the long-term partnership that we've had with Verizon. And Congresswoman Sewell, thank you so much for not only being with us today, those fantastic words of encouragement that you had for us. And I am particularly proud to have you representing us in the 7th District. My wife is also a proud product of the Selma Public Schools. And we have known about the Sewell family, Coach Sewell, and you long before you became Congresswoman Terri Sewell. So we thank you for your continued fight for justice and for our communities, for our business environment. And we accept your challenge to not only continue to grow jobs, but to also be a champion for diversity and inclusion, and to be at the center of all of the positive things that are going to happen for Birmingham and our surrounding communities going forward. So please consider us a partner. Reach out to us and me anytime when we can be helpful to you as you continue to fight for us in Washington. And for the rest of our Governmental Affairs Committee, thank you for your continued work. I look forward to hopefully getting to see you soon. I know we've got a Zoom meeting coming up next week, so I look forward to participating with you in that. But like all of us, hopefully as we manage through this pandemic, we'll get a chance to see each other face to face very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. This concludes our July meeting, and we look forward to talking with all of you again soon. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Goodbye. Thanks.